So this session's about the elite athlete or high performance athlete as the customer. We've heard over the last couple of days the increased funding that goes into this sector, and with that increased funding, the increased expectations about results. We heard about 2000 Olympics, the medal tally, how that increased in London, and according to our minister, the best days are before us. So all of that comes down to pressure and expectation, and that all comes down to the pointy end of the sector, which is the high performance athlete. We've also talked a lot about the events, the Cricket World Cup, the Rugby World Cup, the other successes of our teams, and the Rugby World Cup would have been a fantastic event anyway, but the All Blacks playing well was a big part in the success, as it was with cricket. So what drives these guys? What do they need to do to succeed? And as a sector, how can we support them? That's the purpose of the session. So to kick things off, Nathan, if we start with you, how did you get into rowing in the first place?
Yeah, to be fair, I started off rowing mainly because I wanted to keep fit for rugby. So it was nothing too spectacular. I had absolutely no natural talent at all. I think my first race, I actually got beaten by a girls' race, which was following in behind. So it wasn't a natural fit. But eventually, as a sort of a sport like rowing, the harder you work, generally the better you go. And it soon overtook my rugby aspirations, and that's when I focused solely on the rowing side of things.
And you started off as a single sculler?
Yeah, started off in my age group levels in the single scull. Unfortunately, that pathway was blocked by a couple of exceptional athletes in Rob Waddell and Mahe Drysdale to my generation. So it sort of filtered on that I ended up becoming specialised in the double sculls.
Yeah. I found a quote that you said about an under-18 single sculls race where you said you had a win in 2003. It showed me if you wanted something enough and were willing to push yourself beyond all perceived limits, anything was possible.
Yeah, I can't fully remember saying that, but I was probably thinking of something along those lines. Yeah, probably for me, I managed a medal at World Juniors, which at the time New Zealand rowing generally struggled at the junior level, and so getting a medal there got me thinking a little bit that at the moment I'm on par with everyone else in the world. If I can't keep on developing and sort of carry on my career for the rest of the world, there's no reason why I can't medal on the sort of elite stage 10 years later. So that sort of got that mentality, is that if I can do it when I'm young, if I keep on training hard, why can't I keep up with these guys when I get older? And that's sort of what got me set into the high performance side of the sport.
And standing on the podium at the London Olympics, what were the key factors that led ultimately to that success? What, if you look back on it now, what can you put it down to?
A lot, to be fair. For me, that was 15 years of hard work. Sort of no one thing came down to it. It was a combination of 15 years worth of learning, of experimenting, of things going right, things going wrongly, keeping improving, good team set up, support. It sort of all came as a combination to get it right on the day. And I think the thing about the pinnacle event was that you can be the best athlete, best team the week before the competition, you can be the best the week after, but if you don't do it on the week that matters, it means nothing. And that's probably something that we learned generally as a rowing team at the previous Olympic Games, that it didn't matter what you did beforehand and what afterwards, is what you do on that actual day. And I think it's something we got right in London, is that we actually did the performances when it really mattered.
Yeah. And so you've obviously got your partner in the boat, but you've also got the wider rowing team. How does that makeup work? How much are you a team and how much are you a group of individuals?
Yeah, I'd say very much. Even though you only see two of us in the boat, it's very much a massive team sport. And I think everyone in our rowing system would say that since obviously the sport became centralised, the benefits of the team have sort of really shown in our results. With us now, it's not just the top athletes that are winning medals, but a lot of our second tier, or our fringe athletes, or the people that have always not quite been there, are now winning medals, and that's very much because of the team approach. The athlete as an individual, your performance is generally enhanced by being around the team. We constantly feed off each other, benchmark off each other, get each other through some of those tough days, some of the tough weeks, even a tough year. I think that wouldn't happen as much if you're doing it all as an individual. I think the easiest way to sum it up is when we sort of first started coming in, we acted like a team of individuals, and that probably showed in our results. When we started acting as a team, even though it is a reasonably individual sport, we got far better results. So it was all very much a big combination of everyone in the greater team.
So you're a fan of centralisation, of everyone being together?
Yeah, I guess for me, I was very much a product of rowing centralisation plan. I was probably I was the first generation of athletes that came right through from a junior level to an under 23 to an elite to an Olympic team right through a centralised system. Obviously for us there's always going to be teething issues when it first set up, but I think if I look now as an athlete coming through, I've actually got a younger brother who's 6 years younger than me coming through the same pathway. I guess his pathway of coming through a centralised system has been far different to mine when it first started, but in saying that, I really got the benefits of the centralised system, especially in the last sort of 6 to 8 years of my career, whereas he's probably had it the whole way through. Now that sort of generation wouldn't want it any other way. They know to be successful they have to be part of that centralised system, and they actually want to be part of it. They don't want to be anywhere else other than at the centralised system. So I think that's been a really positive change within our sport, that once we got around some of those teething issues and changed the culture and the landscape of it, we get that full buy-in, and then it's shown in the results. So yeah, other than some of the teething issues to get it off the ground, I've been a fan. For me, growing up down in the deep south without a centralised program, I would have never had the chance to probably learn off the two of the best in the world. I had Rob Waddell, who I got to run Olympic Games with, and Mahi Drysdale, who I've been his training partner for 8 years. If we weren't centralised, none of my results would have been as good as what they were from learning off those two, because obviously one's from Auckland, one's from Waikato, one's from Southland. Without that, we wouldn't have pulled the resources to get the best out of each other.
Now you, according to Google, you beat Mahi Drysdale in single sculls by 7.46 seconds in 2011. How good was that?
It was always nice to beat Mahi once, and because he's not in the room, I can say it was easy. But no, it's not. I think that just sort of shows you with our system and the rowing program. Obviously, Mahi and I have been training partners for many years, and I think it benefited both our careers. I was always probably generally a bit faster in training, so Mahi always sort of used me to get his training pace up, which is ultimately going to help him further on in the international season. And obviously I benefited from being able to train alongside the world's best, so it's always nice to be competitive with each other, and I think we use that competitive nature within us to actually make both of us better, and that was obviously comes back to the product of being able to train together. Great mates off the water, but when we race, I can say probably some of our internal races are actually sometimes tougher than international races, because no one wants to lose to their peers or their teammates, so it sort of brings up that whole standard to another level.
And what have you had to give up for your rowing career?
I never like to use the word give up anything. I think sometimes when you're going to that, when you sort of move out of school, and for me I was straight into the high performance setup in Cambridge, you do feel like you're shall we say, missing out a little bit compared to some of your peers at that age. But I think looking back now in hindsight, I had a far greater, probably last 10, 12 years than any of my peers that didn't sort of carry on in the sporting things, that went away to the university, that seemed to get into the good job straight away. At the time, you felt like it was you had to choose between the two, but now I wouldn't have had it any other way. I think the experience you've got from the sport, I've been very fortunate. Got to meet some extremely great people, travel the world, all these sort of things that put me far greater experience, I think, than giving up. Well, perceived to giving up anything at that young age. Yeah,
and just last question for the moment for you, but in terms of a message to the sports sector, all those people, the NSOs, the funders, the wider sports administration in behind your sport, any sort of messages for the future now that you're retired and about to become a father and moving on?
Yeah, I guess so many people have sort of played a big part in my career, and I think it's something that you do have a massive influence on, especially on a young person coming up. Like for me, I've been surrounded by some great people in both of my programs and then the wider sporting community within New Zealand, and you've all sort of helped shape, I guess, my direction, dare I say it, in life and in a career. And I think for me, there's been arguably hundreds of individuals that all helped out, so everyone plays their part, and I think sometimes that's undervalued, but you can always learn something off someone, and that's sort of the mantra I sort of took, and a lot of people have helped me get to the stage now.
Nice. Now, Dean, hockey, a bit different to rowing, but how did you get first involved in hockey? What got you into the sport?
Yeah, I was one of those kids who just followed their big brother. So I got an older brother who's 3 years older than me. Grew up in Christchurch in a suburb which was really strong in hockey. So Tony Anderson, John Christensen, guys who came from around the Redcliffs area. So really popular in primary school, and just going along to my brother's games, I'd be short, I'd start filling in, and just got into it from there. I had friends that were playing playing soccer or playing football, but I think it was a bit easier for my folks just to take me along to the hockey.
Yeah, and why do you, fantastic international career, debuted in 2001. What do you put down to your success to as a player?
Yeah, I don't think you can sum it up in one thing. I don't think there's kind of a magic bullet, if you like. I think that a little bit similar to what Nathan said, I think I was very, very fortunate to have some very great people around me. So whether that's family, wife, coaches, at really kind of key times, I think in my life. When I was at high school, for example, I think I was really fortunate to have a really strong coach. And then again, when I first made the national team, I think I was very fortunate to have the coaches involved with me there. And I think that it's a little bit of a combination of that, the support I received from my friends and family, and then also the really good support that I had from the coaches.
Yeah. And did you have the funding to be able to fully commit to your sport like you would have wanted?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think that for the sport of hockey, that there's so much in play. There's Indian leagues. There's really strong leagues in Europe. There's a number of FIH events which keep rolling around. There's the Pinnacle World Cups, the Olympics. There's so much in play there that it's a difficult beast. I think that I wouldn't change anything I did. Like I worked through about the last 4 years of my career, and personally, that's something I enjoyed. I enjoyed the challenge of trying to balance those two things. So obviously, the working bit meant that I was able to, buy my first home and do things like that. So for me personally, I did. I think that it's sometimes it's more difficult for other athletes. So I was fortunate enough that I was a senior member of the team in the last, say, half a dozen years, and while that never guarantees you selection, that's a very different proposition to someone who is selected one tour and not selected the next. And I could speak from the heart and say that every single one of those guys would give give everything to be part of an Olympics or a World Cup, but they ultimately have to make decisions too around is family or career more important, or can they make those choices? I think similar to what Nathan said, they're not so much sacrifices, they're choices which you have to make. So for me, did I have the support? Yeah, absolutely. I think I did, and part of that was around my own decision making.
Yeah. And in terms of those younger athletes, I mean, how do they pay the bills? How do they balance, life with their dream to, play with what's really successful Black Sticks team, having just beaten Australia? Yeah,
look, I think that there's a number who are studying, which I think is fantastic. You've got the Prime Minister's scholarships. I remember when I was, I think, second year of university, I was very, very fortunate compared to the other guys going through university when the Prime Minister's scholarship came along. So look, I know that that's something they really do appreciate when there's the funding piece through PEGS when they qualify for that too. So there's a couple of centralised pieces of funding, I guess, if you like. Then there's also within the men's team and the women's team too. To be fair, in hockey, there's a number who are do coaching, so they almost run their own businesses around coaching, which I think gives them some great skills to go on. There's a number who would receive a little bit of funding through playing for local clubs, and then there's another group who would be involved in playing overseas. So in really strong leagues throughout Belgium, Holland, and Germany in particular. And then obviously what's started to come on board for hockey and has been there for cricket for some time is the money, if you like, that's floating around India.
Nice. Now, I was on the Hockey New Zealand website, great website, and looked up your player profile. Weaknesses, controlling the beast.
Yeah.
Talk us through that one.
Quite conscious that Pete's sitting down here, and he probably spoke to me, and a number of people did a few times about this. For me, it was around controlling the red mist, as probably some other people pointed. I think if you'd done a Google search on me too in images, you'd end up with lots of pointy fingers at umpires, which isn't the best look. I appreciate that. So it was around trying to control my own emotions, so when I was frustrated either with myself, I'd made an error, or if I didn't quite agree with what the umpire had said, or if I was frustrated with how we were going as a team, often that would spill itself over in my reaction and normally a poor performance. So for me it was around trying to control that, and again I think I was really fortunate the support I got, and part of it is probably through a maturity, kind of a life maturity that you hopefully start to grow out of that. But that was a very important piece of my game to always control.
Okay, now Rob, we're talking about elite athletes. Do you want to give us a little summary of your career highlights here?
You've got Stewart Island under 10 rugby team written on your notes, so you're going to rip me first.
You're here in your role with the Players Associations. I know you work with a number of sports, but let's start with rugby. Do you want to just explain briefly how the Players Association is set up and how it works in practice?
Yeah, look, I think the main reason around the Players Association back in 99-2000 and the reason we pulled it together in rugby was there's a lot of comments out there about players lacking leadership on the field, off the field, and professionalism rugby. These guys are responsible, do they care? And so at the same time, the athletes felt that there wasn't a connection, that the athletes were acting individually, there wasn't a collective sense of unity or alignment with the game and with the administration. And so the players got together, they wanted to have a voice at the decision-making table. We went around, we talked to the players, we looked at the environments, and what we found was the players didn't lack talent, they didn't lack ability. In fact, as individuals and as people, there was a hell of a lot of talent there. But we felt that amongst senior players and team management and the likes, it was not being very well led. And that wasn't necessarily through a fault of their own, it's just all new, this whole professionalism concept. And so by pulling the athletes together as a collective group, it was really a statement of saying, and the way we pitched it was, this is about the athletes coming together to take some responsibility, to put their hand up and say we want to contribute, and we want to contribute to a legacy of New Zealand rugby. And if we can get alignment and we can get common vision with the administration in the game, then at the end of the day we can drive performance improvements and improvements in our environment, always coming back to that, that vision. And I think over the last 10 to 15 years, that's what we've always focused on. So as a Rugby Players Association, we're an incorporated society. The players are all members. They vote on a board. David Kirk has been our chairman since day one. The McCaws, Conrad Smith, Jerome Kaino, Hiriana Manuel, Sarah Goss, DJ Forbes, they're all on our board. They govern us. We're just simply on a management contract. But our overwhelming vision is that we are there to as the players, and it's not two separate organisations, we are very player driven, to create an environment where the guys and the girls thrive on and off the field, and we contribute to New Zealand's vision of uniting and inspiring New Zealanders. And by having that stake in the ground to say we're with you, New Zealand Rugby, the franchises, the ITM Cup provinces, when we look at the environment and we say what needs to be worked on today, do we do enough around retaining Colin Slade? Are we doing enough around the competitions, broadcasting, the way that the performance analysis of the women's sevens team is going, the connection, all these different issues, we can always come back to that lock that we're there on behalf of the athletes to help everyone step up and do better for the sport.
And how do the athletes' interests, when you're representing them, an older athlete might have a very different view of the world and set of needs to a younger athlete. What about male rugby players versus female rugby players? How do you cater for the wide range of needs and interests?
Yeah, look, I think you don't want to underestimate a couple of aspects that come to mind. First and foremost, we really promote within our environments, we promote the concept of looking at them as people and not as athletes. So if you can either, both individually and collectively, if you can connect with the athletes that are within your environment as people first and foremost, you're going to get the relationship and you're going to get the trust. And from there, a lot of stuff is possible. If you just see them as the athlete and you take that kind of approach of top down, when the pressure comes on, you're not going to have that underlying relationship or relationship of trust to be able to work things. So first and foremost, we're promoting the concept of see them as people. They experience the normal challenges that all people experience growing up and developing and pursuing their dream or what they love to do. It's just slightly abnormal in that it's in a sporting context. And the second one is achieve alignment. So alignment in the sense of the Rugby Players Collective with New Zealand Rugby, But if I take the New Zealand Women's Sevens team, alignment between the players in that program and team management in that program. You know, if you, and you can break it down within teams, it's alignments between the backs coach and the backs. And the key being that in a performance analysis and looking at what they're doing every day, if they can always come back to what they're ultimately aligned on, you've got a much better, more robust procedure. And I think if you look at the Players Association and look at the three areas that we work in, you know, we work around player representation, which frankly is the easy stuff. That's the collective, the money, the agents, all the stuff the players need a voice at around the decision-making table. We work in the personal development space, which is really hard. That's the career education workspace, the financial asset protection space, the character development, the self-resilience and mental fitness. We work in that space a lot, and around player engagement. And player engagement is really an underrated area, because we want to keep it real for the athletes and keep them real, keep them connected to their communities and to their sports, so that they ultimately, when the times get tough, they know they're part of a bigger support network and a bigger picture, and they can rely on that network. So people, alignment, and just really positive engagement with the athletes and with the groups, so that you stay connected with them as organisations and you don't drift apart and become a them and us mentality. It's got to be seen as, like, even the concept of athletes as customers, I'm looking and thinking weird, because in our environments we like to see that we're all part of the same team, and we're actually, from an athlete's perspective, we want to step up and help contribute and help drive the success, not feel like we're sitting back here in a lounge chair with the administration doing all the work. That doesn't enter our framework.
And so for sports administrators, NSOs, RSTs, how do they build a relationship with an athlete?
Yeah, it takes time. So it's a difficult one, and there's multiple facets. I think if you look in a greater context, and I can give some context in a rugby sense, integrity within rugby is a big deal. And a lot of people in the environment will think integrity is wagering and betting. That's not integrity in our mindsets, and, you know, Neil Sorensen, Buck Anderson, the guys from Rugby Union here will be saying the same thing. Integrity to us is the brand of rugby. So anything that affects the brand of rugby, you know, maintaining the integrity of the game is crucial. So who are some of the big influences on whether you maintain the integrity? How we deal with a concussion incident on the weekend, an anti-doping issue, a wagering issue, how the players act around social media, how they act in social settings around females, you know, all those kind of risky areas to the brand of your game. How on earth are we going to create an environment where they respect the integrity of the game and they make good decisions to preserve and enhance the integrity of the game, unless the athletes are actually organised and engaged and being dialogued with? And if you leave them sitting out there as individuals with their individual support networks, and they start to see that you're actually not engaging them, they're going to go off and make some decisions over here, and you're not going to be connected to them. And that's where you're going to get risky things happening to your sport. So, you know, the idea is to try within your environments to collectively get them into the team and get them meaningfully represented and meaningfully engaged, and then work from there on how you bring things to your environment where you're able to individually connect with them. So Colin Slade made a big decision today. It's all through the papers. He's leaving to go overseas. But I really appreciated the way in which he laid it out for everyone. He's always made it clear to Sauce and his team at the NZRU that he's going to go overseas at some stage. You know, last time around it was a close call, but he didn't go, he stayed. He paid great respect to the offer that was put on the table by New Zealand Rugby. He knows they went as far as they possibly could, and he respected that. But at the end of the day, he made a decision for him and his partner and his future and the stage of his career. And the reciprocation is that New Zealand Rugby know they did all they could. They engaged with Colin. There was nothing left unsaid. There was nothing left off the table. Really personal conversations were held because the relationship was there. At the end of the day, it's the decision I don't like. I don't want to see him go. But it's a decision I respect and will fully support in him. And I know Neil Sorensen, the NZRU, and Chewy would say exactly the same thing. But that's because of that connection they had at an individual level. And so I think, you know, collective, breaking it down to the individual.
Dean, you have any experience with the Players Association?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I was involved with the Hockey Players Association when it was formed a long time ago, and I think that for us it was always about, you know, hockey the sport and trying to assist and get hockey the sport as far as it could. That was ultimately whatever it always came back to, and it was. Yes, you'll have disagreements, but to me, if you're coming back to what Rob was saying, that stake in the ground, you know, how are we taking hockey forward, or are we making hockey a better sport by doing this? Then I think that the Players Association has a fantastic role to be able to play in that and be a voice. I absolutely really strongly believe that, and that the support I had, which was actually through Rob and the Cricket Players Association, through my professional development, I feel so fortunate that I got opportunities through that, and I would acknowledge that, you know, hockey, the sport, doesn't have, and a number of sports be the same, you know, you don't have limited funds, so that's leverage off different networks that a Players Association might have, or that a hockey association might have through their business networks to help athletes in their career if that's what they want to be able to do. And I was in a position where I got support to be able to do that, and ultimately I'm working in the role I am now but because of that. And it also gave me great networks that I, you know, continue to have and obviously continue to develop. So I think it's a very, very positive thing to be able to just have that common goal, like let's take hockey forward, let's take rugby, rowing forward as a collective.
Nathan, what support networks do the rowers have?
Yeah, sort of, it's something being a bit of an ongoing process, and something that was initiated post-Beijing. We had a senior athlete sort of planning group, which probably gave the senior athletes a voice, you know, probably for the sake of the whole team. We don't have an association as such, but it made us accountable to some of the decisions we made as athletes, and at least gave us the ability to sort of let the management and the administration know some of the stuff that was affecting us or affecting the organisation or the sport or our performance, and sort of have that two-way relationship, which I think really helped sort of that forming that relationship that Rob was talking about. And, you know, for us, we, you know, as athletes, when there was a decision that could have gone either way, generally we're consulted on that process. And, you know, as athletes, when you feel like you've been consulted, you're much more likely to buy into it. And I think it created a lot more harmony within the planning and the general team as well, between the athletes and the staff.
Okay, we've still got a bit of time left, so I'm sure there's some questions out there for any of these three gentlemen. Questions? Go on, ask it.
Rob, as CEO of the organisation that you lead, how do your personal values align to those of the organisation?
Yeah, look, and it's something we talk to a lot of the players about around their personal development. You know, I'm a firm believer that you're going to be pretty good at something you really enjoy, that you love doing. And right from day one, I connected with this. I had a whole lot of interests outside of sport, and very quickly I just binned the whole lot because I really, really enjoyed and believed in what we were doing. And I was fortunate enough with someone like a David Kirk as chairman, and to come through with a generation of players, from the Mark Hammetts to the Anton Olivers to the McCaws and the Smiths and Mea Lamus and co. You know, we just had, it's been such a great ride. And so I think it would be fair to say, I'm not sure whether I've learned more than I've given, if that makes sense. Like, I feel incredibly privileged, and I think the values that the organisation now represents has just kind of merged. You know, we've got a great office, we've got a great team there, work across rugby, cricket, hockey, netball, lots of the different sports, and I think it's we've grown up over 15 years, and I think so it's a bit of both, to be honest. But I firmly believe in the values that we focus on as a Rugby Players Association. You know, it's about people first and foremost. It's about unity. You know, we like to think we move together, and you know, it's about success. And it works all the way through to ultimately building a legacy, something that we can look back on with real pride. And that's something that the players, so they're the kind of values that the players have given us. It's in our brochure, it's what we practice, we come back to it at board meetings, and I look at them and think, shit, that's a pretty good way to live your life as well. It's quite good that I can do that as a job too. Yeah.
Any other questions? Dean, I've got one for you. Break Sticks have just beaten Australia, #1 team in the world, in a tournament format. What does the team need to be able to consistently perform at that sort of level?
Yeah, fantastic result. How good was it? Very, very enjoyable. Look, I think that you know, centralisation, say that the rowers have, that there's no doubt. So we've in a hockey model had a period of centralisation generally leading up to pinnacle events. So World Cup, Olympics, Commonwealth Games, and there's real benefit in that. Like being able to spend more time together. You know, how much more is coming out in the space and in sports science around recovery. You know, so being able to have time to be able to do those small things, around nutrition, around video analysis. There's so many more tools that teams, that athletes can use. So to me, that's kind of the next frontier for hockey. How can we get the teams together more often? How can we get the guys and the girls together for more days in the year? That's to me the ultimate to move towards, and that's a really difficult challenge. Like I said, there's the people aspect, which Rob's spoken about a lot, and I think is a massive part of it. You've got guys, say with families in another city. So how can we get them involved if the decision is to centralise in Auckland? We've got guys with really strong ties to club teams in Europe and have got a lot of benefit out of that, like I did. So if we do that, will we miss out anything there? There's just the complexity of that, but I think that you just look at it and say, right, where do we need to get to? And like guys on stage have said, you need to just make it happen, really. So work through those processes, ensure that we look after the people, ensure that we look after their families, but make it happen.
So it's an interesting thing is that everyone often sees the Rugby Players Association, a whole lot of money. It's easy for you guys because you can pay players to be fully assembled. But if I look at the stuff we're involved in at the moment, the Women's Sevens program, we're at we're trying to keep pace with the girls' development as a real world-class team, and they're getting better and more demanding all the time. So we have had an MOU, for 2 years nearly, Sauce? We're going to be doing our third revision within the next 2 weeks because we need to mature it to keep pace with them and the demands they have between the program, their lives, their careers, their study and family. We're in hockey negotiations at the moment. The biggest issue the guys are talking about in hockey is exactly what Dean has just articulated. We're, with the netball, we're in discussions at the moment around a new collective at Silver Ferns level, and one of the biggest issues is how do the demands between Trans-Tasman, Silver Ferns, the schedules and the commercial programs and obligations, how does it all match out? It's some of the toughest environments Samoan Rugby Union at the moment, we've got them in the office on Friday, they're not financial issues. The toughest stuff we have to deal with is how you balance what an individual athlete as a person has going on in their lives and wants to pursue and wants to protect vis-a-vis what the program needs to be successful. It's a hell of a wrestle. Swimming, same sort of thing. We've got, I think in the Women's Sevens program, we've got 26 girls and only 2 of them are working now. All the rest are studying, and everyone says, oh, that's great, they're studying. They're only studying because they want to be doing something. Most of them actually want to be working, but they feel they should be doing something. Prime Minister's scholarship is great, so to feel some sort of sense of progression as an individual, they study. But there's no doubt about it, it creates real tension. It's the toughest aspect, I feel, at high performance sport, is getting that connection and managing that relationship.
Got a question down here?
Well, you spend most of your life negotiating, I imagine.
Discussing, we have a concept of courageous conversations. So if you can create the right environment, have some of the conversations that we're privileged to have in rugby, particularly around our high performance teams, you'd be quite stunned with the conversations that happen with everyone in the room. And some people that don't know better would look at it and say, how can you say that to that person in that room? Because some of them are incredibly, it's not below the line stuff, but it's incredibly personal and can be highly critical of something that's happening. But if you can't have those conversations, then you're never going to address the issues.
When you're negotiating with an external party or a client, do you have any credos or any tips for success in negotiating?
Preparation and planning. So we approach it not too dissimilar to a campaign. In our view, it's all around preparation and planning. When we engage with the administrative body, we agree how we're going to engage. So we agree what we call a negotiation protocol. With the Samoan Prime Minister, it was a little bit delicate, so we called it a discussion protocol. And we took every word negotiation out of the picture, but we had to agree the rules on how we're going to engage. We are all about athlete engagement, so we like to bring the athletes to the table at the right times, not to waste their time, but to have them conscious of what's going on and hear the discussions and hear the conversations. And actually, at the end of the day, some of the greatest rugby deals, we've sat back and watched the athletes and the administration shake their hands and do the final touch-up, because that's great. They feel like they own part of the outcome. So there's some of the tips that are crucial.
One other question, the scope of your organisation interests, it seems reasonably broad. And I just asked, do you think that the sports have abdicated their responsibility
So each New Zealand Rugby Players Association is its own body, New Zealand Cricket Players Association, hockey, they're separate, Netball Association is separate. No, I look at it the other way around. It's the other way around. It's actually about the athletes stepping up. It's very easy to point the finger at the administration, and all we would ask, or all I would, I suppose, ask, is that help them do it, like help lead it, help the athletes get organised in a way that suits you and your environment and your sport, and help them do it, because the rewards you're going to get are massive if you do it correctly. You'll get greater engagement, greater responsibility, and you'll be amazed at where you can take things from there. So be seen to help it, but it has to come from the athletes. So we've made a couple of mistakes over the time where we've felt some athletes have come through the door from a sport, they've said, we've got all these issues, and we've said, okay, well, you need to form an association, and we'll help you do that, and then we go and knock on the door type thing, and then we've looked it over our shoulders, and the kind of athletes have disappeared on us. And it's just, the reality is they just weren't ready for it. It has to come, and that happened with netball. 3 years later, they came back and said, we're ready for this now, and we said, great, we'll help you. And absolutely, it's been up and running for 7 years. So ultimately, it's got to come from within the swimmers. I think in some of the Olympic sports, you're dealing with really young athletes, and I think parents are a crucial part to that mix, and those that influence the athletes. So we're in some dialogue with swimming at the moment. Clearly the swimmers are quite a young group, and the parents are a major funder of and supporter of that swimmers program. The parents need to be factored into that mix. So it's horses for courses, but as administrative bodies, I'd encourage you to help them make it happen, because your rewards are going to be significant.
Another question over here? Yep.
Hope you can hear me back here. I'm interested, I'm just wondering if you could comment on, speaking of leadership, the role that the Players Association might play in thinking about the challenges or opportunities of private ownership in Super 15?
Yeah, so would have been 6 or 7 years ago, we started dialogue with New Zealand Rugby around the concept of introducing that. And from a Players Association perspective, we recognise we're in a global market, and at some stage we needed to be able to bring more parties to the table to help us combat the pressures from overseas. And the view that what we talked about, and I think that's kind of what emerged through this licensing arrangement, is we saw you hear of the public-private partnership. We had this kind of picture of private rugby partnership. So we weren't about saying chuck the licence right out there like in the UK models and have the teams completely separately owned. We're about saying, how do you create a sensible ownership structure for the Chiefs that incorporates rugby within that region, so the provinces within that region, maybe some individual businessmen or leaders from within that region, maybe some facility owners, so a stadia or council, people that were key to the success of and influential in that area, as well as obviously the licence in New Zealand Rugby. And if you could start to share some of the weight and introduce, whether it's some capital or connections or intellectual value in terms of IP, then we're going to be more robust at a franchise level to be able to then work within the overall New Zealand Rugby framework to combat the influences from overseas. And in a way, that's what we're starting to see a little bit now. The franchises have got more independence. They're able to be a much greater part of the conversation around retaining players and retaining coaches. The flip side is it does produce some interesting dynamics at times. So, the way that New Zealand Rugby has done it, I think it's a combination. It's not complete privatisation. What it is, it's a combination. It's like, how can we take the best out of private enterprise or councils or connections and mix it with rugby for a much greater outcome for everyone? That's how we've approached it. Quite different than what you see on the other environments. Yep.
We've got time for one last question. Nigel.
Just a question for all three. I think you're all at stages of your career or in the work that you do that you deal a lot with the sports organisation or others in the network. And this conference is all about improving our knowledge and our product and how we support and serve sport. If you had to make a couple of observations about things that we could do better as a sector from where you sit, what would they be?
Great question. Let's start with you, Nathan.
I'll make it really simple. Probably communication. I think it's come on a long way, and it's always developing. But I think the number one thing is open communication. I think that goes a long way to solving a lot of little issues that become big issues if the communication's clear.
Go on, you've got to get two, mate. That's one. I'm counting.
Oh, two things. All right. Communication, and then Yeah, obviously from a, probably more a rowing point of view, but it's not even from any sport, it becomes your whole bubble. You're surrounded by it all the time, so it's probably developing you outside of that bubble as well. It'd be a big thing for the, sort of the athletes in the new generation coming through, is giving those opportunities to provide better people and not just better athletes. I think they can be done both together. And if we worked on that, I think it'd be the next step, and we were sort of we're getting a lot of the results sort of stuff sorted out now, and keep on developing the people side of things will go a long way to hopefully creating better products at the end of it all.
Dean?
Yeah, I'll go for just stick to the basics. So I think, like I said earlier, I don't feel there's ever a, silver bullet out there, right? It's about nailing the basics, and I think that there must be so much knowledge, and I know that there is a lot of knowledge in this room, and I think that, from an athlete's point of view, we trust in the leadership that's in this room that you're going to be able to do it. So it is nailing the basics like communication. I think it is, I believe, and something I'm very passionate about, is the basic of supporting our athletes, whether that's through their leadership development, professional development, education through study, whatever it might be. But I think, absolutely nailing your basics around the communication piece, and then how we support our athletes, and that takes, I think, many forms, through just plain simple, open, honest communication, all the way through to say, is there a program where we can support people through leadership development or through career development?
Rob?
Yeah, I think it's a similar theme. I think in terms of the engagement or the communication one, I think there's a real crucial element here, and that's the listening aspect of communication. So a lot of communication I've seen from administrative bodies over the times has been to send out a directive or send out an email and say, I've communicated, I've done a bloody good job. But actually, the most important part of my experience of communication is to actually listen. And you can't listen if they're in another room, or they can't listen if they're at the end of a computer. You've actually got to take the time and energy to sit down and engage in genuine conversation and connect. And so I think that would be one of the things. And then leading on from that, I think, is explore. So explore the conversation more. Don't just take it, because you can have conversations at this level, but when you actually delve down, we have it in a misconduct situation. A guy stuffs up. It's easy to fine the player. It's the easiest thing for a minute. You see the NRL doing it left, right and centre. We'll chuck out a big fine. We send the right message to the public. New Zealand rugby, and over the last recent years, I can't remember the last time we necessarily fined, but one of the things that are done is we do everything to avoid the player making the mistake. But if he does make the mistake, how he deals with it, or she deals with it, is crucial. And actually asking, why did that happen? Why did you go out and have a bender? What's going through? What's happening with you? Is there an issue that we can help with? Can we support you? That's the more courageous conversation to have. So that's delving down into a deep conversation. And then you might actually get to the bottom as to why the behaviours are happening, as opposed to just slapping the fine and walking away. So I think it shows that you care, it shows that you're willing to engage, and coming out of there will be some really, really good learnings that'll help your program, form your relationships, and away you go. And it ties back ultimately to obviously achieving some sort of alignment as well, as we've already talked about.
Okay, well, thank you all for your time. Dave?
Great session, guys. Yeah, really, thank you very much.